So often when we think we're buried, we've actually been planted. But you have to stay with it long enough that you're watering the seeds, giving them time to grow, and then bearing the fruits. You don't expect something to grow instantly when you plant it in the ground.
Welcome to Radically Loved Radio. I am your host, Rosie Acosta, yoga teacher and teacher trainer, mindfulness coach, speaker, and creative writer. I am also the founder of radicallylove.com, a website where you can go for more information about yoga, mindfulness, meditation, and lifestyle advice. On this podcast, we talk to people within our health and wellness community that are creating content through the ritualistic practice of yoga, meditation, or overall mindful living. We hope to create value in your life so that you can achieve your highest potential and live a radically loved life. To stay in touch with us, just follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Rosie Acosta and on Facebook at Radically Loved Rosie. You can sign up for our newsletter on radicallylove.com to stay up to date on future workshops, retreats, and latest podcasts. This podcast is brought to you by Four Sigmatic. I have been waiting for months for this product to come out, and it's finally here, the Four Sigmatic Mushroom Focus Shot. Four Sigmatic has always believed in seeking energy through nutrient-dense foods, sleep hygiene, movement, and hydration. So when they came up with this product as an alternative to all those gnarly energy drinks that are out there, I was so excited. This is the first ready-to-drink product that promotes focus and energy without all the gnarly ingredients. You can sip half of the bottle of lion's mane and guayusa with the powerful pineapple taste from only real ingredients. No artificial sweeteners or flavors are allowed. I can drink half of the bottle in the morning and then half in the afternoon, and it doesn't make me feel weird and jittery in the afternoon. Go to foursigmatic.com and use the promo code RadicallyLoved, that's RADICALLYLOVED, to get a special discount on all the Four Sigmatic products. Back to our show. Hey listeners, we need your support. Help us by subscribing and rating to this podcast. Send us a snapshot of your review or comment, and we will send you a very special Radically Loved gift. Send your comment to info@radicallyloved.com. You can also click on the show notes here on this podcast for more information. If you want to be part of our community, please click the link to our private Facebook group on the show notes of this particular podcast so you can be the first to hear of upcoming trainings, retreats, and special Radically Loved events. Thanks so much for listening. Andrea Marcum is not only an incredible yoga teacher, but she's also an incredible yogi. She's known for weaving accessible yogic philosophy into poses and loves leading the most unassuming newbies to yoga and mindfulness, and works with everyone from athletes to executives. Her latest book, Close to Om, Stretching Yoga from Your Mat to Your Life, is out now, and it was one of my favorite reads. We are not only in the same yoga community, but we are on the same path to creating more love and light to all the people around us. And she is not only a fan and supporter of this show, but she is just an overall incredible human being. And I was really excited to not only chat with her, but to really just get an insight into her own philosophy and how she uses these modalities into her daily life and the importance of ritual. I'm so excited to share this conversation with all of you. Here is Andrea Marcum. We've been trying to make this happen for a little while, right?
Yeah.
How long? A couple months.
I think a few months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Andrea Marcum is here on my couch. We're having some coconut oolong tea. She's
so delicious.
My reputation stands, you guys. Just FYI.
It just got elevated.
And so we're here today to talk about a couple of different things, and I'm really excited to have you on. First of all, this is the first time we've met in person.
Yeah.
I did read your book, Close to Om, which I'm excited to also talk about.
Excellent.
And yeah, I'm happy to have you here and to talk about all of the things, ritual and bringing practice into your daily life and why it's important.
I'm so glad to be here. Yay.
So tell me about, a little bit about how you've been able to get to the place where you are now as a teacher and as a yogi, and what that process has been like for you and how you've been able to stay consistent with your practice.
Well, I stumbled into a yoga class 20 some odd years ago at Crunch Gym. And at that point, I was an avid, there wasn't enough cardio in the world to satiate me, So I stumbled in and I was pretty annoyed. I remember hearing your first yoga experience,
yeah.
And you walked in and you felt like it was home.
Yeah.
And I was quite the opposite. I was pretty sure I wanted to run the other way. And I was nauseated in my first down dog, and the teacher kept telling me not to bite my lip, which wasn't even something I realized that I did, but was so significant because it sort of signified everything else I was biting into that wasn't serving me. So I had this moment at the end where I thought, I'm either never doing this again or I must come back tomorrow, because it was immediately confrontational. And I went back the next day, and I came from a background of being a gymnast. So I had been a competitive gymnast. All things athletic were kind of what resonated with me. And even in that first class, the somatic reaction was what got my attention.
Yeah.
But over time, it became this unexpected organizing system for my life. And that confrontation was uncomfortable, and it continues to be, but it is that discomfort that is the richness of this practice. And, life is uncomfortable. So the organizing system and the tools that it delivers are, how do I, tease this out, get out of the sort of stuck in a spin cycle, and start to see it for what it is, and then create space around it to actually then make progress.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking to the confrontational aspect of yoga, because I think for a lot of people that find this practice to be resonating initially, for some people, they really enjoy the confrontation right away, right? They want to go into the deep dive. But I think for most people that I've come into contact with, and even some of my students, the confrontational aspect doesn't come until later, right? It's it's a thing that happens over time, because they're maybe more focused on just the physical aspect of yoga as something that is said to make you feel good.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So for you, the confrontational aspect, how are you able to discern that, and what kind of things was it bringing up for you?
Well, there was a lot of nothing's ever enough going on in my life, big time. And just even having to sit as still as it was in a first child's pose was pretty big.
Yeah.
Shavasana, that can be a giant confrontation for all of us, myself included. The whole element of simply being with myself was radical, and is radical, and is... I think where the radical love comes from, right, is learning how to sit with ourselves literally in a pose, and then learning how to be with ourselves in a genuine way so we can be with each other and be good with each other. And that's the union that's yoga.
Yeah.
But, at first, like you said, it is this sort of why do I feel nauseated in a down dog, or why is this... pose so hard for me to hang out in.
Right.
But then you start, it's like the layers of an onion that you start to peel away.
Yeah. Yeah. Just so you guys know, I don't know if you guys can hear that we have some major life metaphors happening right now. We have gardeners. Yeah. And we have some major tree cutting right across the street from our house. So, we're going to try and just incorporate that into this conversation. So I hope you guys...
In a moment, I'm going to blow dry my hair as well. Right. So,
So really, I text messaged Andrea earlier about what was happening, and she goes, we can definitely incorporate this in. But I think it's apropos, right, to what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's that creating space, even though life swirls around you, and it just does, right? It's not going to stop.
Well, what is this thing that we have this belief system that we think that there's the one panacea that's going to create peace in everything, and unless we find that, we'll never be happy. Do you think that that's true?
I don't. I mean, I think it's a lofty idea. I actually think that it is within that discomfort that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And in my book, I mention what's in the way is the way, which is actually a Marcus Aurelius quote. But
I love that.
Me too. And in yoga philosophy, it's pradipakshibhavanam. Mm-hmm. But things that feel like pushback or a negative, things that are a challenge, are actually the nugget of gold. They are where the most opportunity lives. And, you bump up against that all the time in asana and on your mat. And then you realize, wait a minute, this is just a metaphor for what I'm bumping up against all the time after I've rolled up my mat and I'm out in the world. And in the book, I talk about, because we tend to be very reactive. Certainly I was in my first class, and it's not like I've solved that. I still have that, like to leaf blowers. And no. It's that knee jerk of, I like this, I don't like this. I'm good at this, I'm not good at this. Yeah. I've succeeded, I'm failing. And actually, the yoga is this great neutralizer where we actually arrive in a laboratory on our mat and off, and it just becomes this learning space. It's a curiosity ritual, and I think those are the muscles that we want to stretch and strengthen the most. It's just to stay curious and learn and not get caught up in this, I'm good at this, I'm bad at, in the reaction of black and white, because it's really, most of life is existing in this gray zone, the gray area.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like the more that we can integrate that into our daily life, things can become way more sustainable, as opposed to thinking, I need to fix something, or this is wrong with me, how do I eradicate this? Or, that feeling of not feeling like we're enough, or like something's wrong with us, and so on. So I do want to talk about your book, and in fact, there's a couple of questions I want to ask you pertaining to it. The first one is, you've been teaching for a long time. What led you to create this? Like, why did you decide now to write this particular book close to home?
I've been teaching for almost 20 years. So, obviously after that first crunch episode.
You've come a long way.
I've come a long way, indeed. But it did, part of the confrontation was like, wow, this is life-changing. Like, this is actually making me take a look at things in a whole new aperture. And because of that, and because I could feel that, and it's ongoing, it enters you into this realm of laboratory, and then you just want to keep tinkering, and because it was bringing forth so much in my own life, I wanted to share it with other people. I wanted to be able to figure out how to bring other people on with me. And not because I thought I was righteous or I had all the answers, but because I think we're all in it together. And that's really what the practice is it's ongoing. It isn't one panacea where you then, have arrived. Right. It's heavy lifting. Yeah. Even things like gratitude and, those sorts of things can sound really fluffy and like they're just going to float through your feed and you're just going to float through life. But to really practice that is heavy lifting on an ongoing basis, and I think that it's also not an isolated thing. It's something that we want to commune around, which is part of the ritual, which is, yes, it's an individual practice, and we want our own accountability, but we really want to keep inviting each other in because that's where the real community comes and the real benefit comes.
Yeah, I agree. I love that you said, she just said gratitude in air quotes, because it's like, this is one thing that I find myself struggling with in the realm of just shifting your perspective or your attitude, right? Because it's a romantical idea to just say, oh, I'm just going to practice gratitude. But the hard part is actually in the doing, right? It's like actually putting things into practice and doing things on a daily that's going to help create that shift in your life, you know? And it's more than just, I'm going to post this inspirational quote today because I really need to like feel it. It's like, okay, yeah, that's great, but how are you going to incorporate it into your life? And what is the lesson that you've learned from it? I'm a big student, right? So it's like, I'm all about learning. I will be forever a student, and I want to continue to learn and learn as much as I can.
Yeah. Me too.
Right? And so this was my next question for you is, in your yogic path or in your process, not even just as a yogi, but just as a woman, and a woman that's mission is to bring love and light and integrating these yogic philosophies into your students' lives. What has been the biggest lesson that you've learned on your path to spirituality?
I think that it is ongoing, and that you have to keep going. I mean, I went from the crunch class to like getting certified, which back in the day there wasn't these sort of 200 and 500 hour thing. But I started teaching pretty right away, and I'd been a manager at a restaurant, and I remember I subbed out my shifts. And at a certain point, months later, they were like, "You don't have a job here anymore. What are you talking about?" Like, it was just something where I got private clients, and I started teaching, and it just was the right time for me. Like, it was just the right fit for me. And I taught at a little studio for a little while, and then needed to leave there really quickly. And I had the opportunity to either like go to Yoga Works or start my own thing. And I was not interested in being an entrepreneur. So I went kicking and screaming into my own business, which I'm so glad that I did, because it was sort of the next level of me using my yoga to stay present, to invite community, because I didn't know a lot of the things. I didn't go to business school, so I had to ask for help. I had to invite the community into the project of actually building our nest, and I called it U Studio for the unity and community that built it. And we really did. And we were on the 5th floor of an Art Deco building in Wilshire, in the Wilshire district, that had no signage. So you had to really want to be there. You had to want to find us.
Yeah.
And it made me realize that community was the bomb for me. Like, that is my thing. I love it.
Yeah.
Every single person that crossed that threshold, you're so grateful for them.
Yeah.
And that we all then have each other and see each other through these things that we do. And yoga asana is part of it, right? But that was a huge thing for me. And then I started getting called out into the world to teach, and I love traveling, and I've led retreats for the last 20 years too. And I do feel that to be stretching, like using your mat as a magic carpet to go and see the world. And at that point, I realized that I didn't have to pay for brick and mortar, which was increasingly difficult in an oversaturated marketplace here in Los Angeles, to create community. That community is what happens within the walls, and you can blow the walls off the studio. It's great to have brick and mortar. I'm so grateful to have had that for 9 years. I was around for 9 years. Yeah. And then it just came time for me to let it be more expansive. And the book was a part of that. The book was a struggle. It took me 10 years to get it published. I was writing articles. Somebody said, "You should write a book." I went out with an agent. Everybody turned me down. I mean, like, everybody. And I gave up. And year or so later, I was on the beach in Mexico leading a retreat, and one of my students asked me what my passion was, and I said, "Well, it's my book, but I've given up on that." And another student on the beach on our retreat said, "You should meet my sister-in-law. She's an agent in New York." And I happened to be going to New York the next week for Lululemon, and I met with Jane, the sister-in-law agent, and for 2 years, we worked on the proposal. Not the book, mind you, just the pitch. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning. I wrote it. I would think it was pretty good. I would turn it into Jane, and she would rip it down to its studs, and we would start all over again. Just like every time you unroll your mat, you're starting all over. You're beginning again. Yeah. And we got to a place, 2 years in, where I was getting out of my studio. I thought I was getting out of my lease, but I actually had 2 more years on my lease, so I went $30,000 in debt getting out of my lease. I'm a yoga teacher, so $30,000 is more like $300,000 with my...
Could be $3 million,
yeah,
might as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I was $30,000 in debt, and 16 years into my teaching career, I was beginning at YogaWorks as a sub. So I was standing in front of people who were like, "Where's Vinnie Marino?" You know, and which is great.
I've subbed that class before, by the way. Yeah, right? It sucks.
It's tough, but it's great. I think it's so important to be humbled all along the way.
Yeah, of course.
And in the meantime, you know, here I am waking up at 4 a.m. and I can feel my family and my friends like uncomfortable talking about like, "Oh, Andy, what are you thinking with this book?" Including my brother, who's like a pretty well-known screenwriter, just sort of had given up on. They didn't want to see me hurt anymore, right? So, and then we reached this point where Jane decided it was time to go to publishers, and really big publishers were interested. But you don't know that when you're slogging away $30,000 in debt, subbing for Vinnie Marino, with no guarantee that anybody's going to care that you've spent all this time on it. And then I signed my deal, and the book was relatively easy to write after all that rigorous.
Yeah, of course.
But it all goes to say, and I say this in the book quite often, that so often when we think we're buried, we've actually been planted. But you have to stay with it long enough that you're watering the seeds, giving them time to grow, and then bearing the fruits. You don't expect something to grow instantly when you plant it in the ground. And sometimes I think we do have that expectation, and especially in this day and age, that things need to be happening fast. But we actually want them to happen, we want to do them well. We want to take the time to do them well, I think.
Yeah, that's, as Oprah would say, a tweetable moment. Because I agree with you 100%. You know, I definitely, of course, we all are in this new age of instant gratification, and we want things to happen fast, and we want to see the result, right? We don't think about the long-term, journey to getting there, the falling, the things that haven't worked, the times we go to bed thinking nothing's going to work out, or nobody's returning your calls, or whatever, all those things. Like, we don't see that. We see this beautiful, collection of practices and philosophy and postures, and we just see the finished product.
Yeah.
Right. So I love especially when I have authors on the podcast talking about that, because I find it, for me and for the listeners, they really need to hear that part of it, because things don't just, it's not
like that. Your hands have to get dirty. You dig around in the dirt for a long time. And it's not with the perfect lighting. It's not the glossy filtered anything. It's you mucking around in it. And in the work itself, it's not easy to write. It's really tough stuff. And it doesn't always come. Just like, some days you go and you do your poses on your mat and they feel pretty great. And other days you're just like, oh, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with writing. You have to show up, and you just find out what shows up then, and you're consistent with it. And I'm so grateful that I didn't get published the first time around, because it became a much better book.
Yeah.
I became a better writer, thanks to my agent. It was really like 2 years of boot camp and writing boot camp.
Yeah.
And my agent Jane said something to me early on in the process of writing it. Because it's a narrative, and then it takes you from the story that is, a story from my life, to on your mat. So, where it is that you take these stories and these tenets into your practice on your mat, and then on your own, which is how you take them into your life. So each chapter progresses that way. And she said to me, Andy, this is not a book about you. And it was like, I said, oh, you just became my guru. I mean, like, if you look at things in your life through that, it's the most amazing mantra ever, because it takes the onus off of you, for sure. But it's also, yes, the stories are about me, but they're really about all of us. And that's what we want to bring forth as teachers, as authors, as human beings. It's really not a narcissistic journey. It's one where we're honest about our own stuff, but we're honest in a way that invites you to be honest, because we're the same. You know?
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like the books that have resonated with me the most are the ones that are written in that light, that are written in a way for me to feel like I'm going through this journey with you, and I understand the logic behind these 3 different processes, you know, and so thank you for doing that. That's really great. I think that for the people listening, when they pick up this book, they'll get the same thing out of that. Cool. So I also feel like you said something that I want to go back to a little bit. This idea of us creating a filtered existence, right? Especially now, as I said. Mm-hmm. Why do you think we're doing that at this stage in our culture?
Probably because we can. I mean, I think we've always wanted that a little bit. I mean, I don't think we've ever not been somewhat appearance driven, but I think now we have these ways to manipulate that we didn't, and this immediacy that we didn't. But I think that in terms of the popularity contest that can sometimes contribute to, I think that's always been around. I think it's just so accessible and in your face now that it feels different, that you can actually create a career around being an influencer. Like, you know, that wasn't, you know, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But it's there now, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's a new, you know, you could also now be an Uber driver and your house can be an Airbnb. So, right. I mean, like, we live in a different time, right? Yeah. So those accessibilities are, I think, change the way in which it maybe is presented or feels.
Yeah.
But I think people have been chasing stardom or whatever that is, popularity.
Yeah.
You know, for a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah.
I think it also, just to add to that, or I'd like to get your insight on where you think our yoga community is going. You know, you've seen it, you've been in it for 20 years. You've seen how it's changed now over time. Where do you see it going for the next 20 years?
It's a great question. And I think it will probably go a number of different directions. Because yoga means so many different things to so many different people, right? I mean, for some people it is asana, and for some people not only is it asana, it's like exotic abilities within asana that are then very photogenic. So there's that,
right?
And that's fine, that's great, you know. And then there's also what yoga brings as the organizing system that I talked about, that really is what's interesting to me and what lights me up. That deeper dive, and I don't mean to say that and sound righteous. I just mean like it's actually the heavy lifting we were talking about. Yeah. And it's not that it's easy to do those other things, but the layered approach, the things that give you, at least to my mind, a ritual that you can perform in your life that might partly take place on your mat, but is likely to not most of the time. There's rituals within my book that I mention. There is a program that I do in various like day-long and weekend retreats that is kind of a curation of what's in my book that's very specific to a ritual that I do every day. That is, I think it's nice to access the book. You can read it linearly if you want to, but then go back to the things within it as a resource. And the real like sort of skeletal ritual structure that I have is really 5 points in the morning and in the evening that you will be able to be to sustain, because otherwise like none of us will if it's too elaborate or complicated or time consuming, right?
Yeah. So talk to us about the importance of having ritual, and maybe give the listeners a couple of things that they can do to begin to incorporate that.
Sure. Well, one thing that, like, when I first stumbled into that crunch class, and for years and years, I thought I was meditating because I was doing yoga. And I do think that yoga is a movement meditation, but I've since found the significance of a seated practice. And when I'm on the road, which is pretty often, my asana might fall away a little bit, but my meditation practice is consistent. And I do 20 minutes every morning. I'm not like, hours and hours, but if I do 20 minutes every morning, that does it for me. And I journal for 10 minutes. Sometimes I want to journal longer, but I just try to be consistent with those things. And I think the overriding thing that I would say as a ritual is to make sure that there's something in the morning that allows you to pay close attention. Maybe it's a walk, maybe it's your meditation, maybe it's journaling, or some combination of the three. But where you really tune in and pay close attention to yourself, so there's a foundation that you can reach out from, and that throughout the day, at some point, consistently every day, you decide to give someone your attention. I suggest that be a 5-minute give someone your attention, where you're really present, you're not scrolling through anything, your mind's not elsewhere. You give someone your attention because you've given yourself your attention, so you've got your cup full, so it can runneth over. And it's extraordinary what you can learn when you give someone your attention, because they come at you with different stories and ideas and input that can help you get away from what I call in the book where you're stuck at. So letting that insight in, even just for 5 minutes every day, is pretty extraordinary, and a ritual that will add richness to your day every day. It just will. Wow. Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, amazing people to give your attention to. Such extraordinary stories.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's my big thing, and I've talked about this on the podcast before. Anytime, because I travel a lot as well, so anytime I get into an Uber or Lyft, no preferences here, guys. Anytime I get into either or, I have this rule that I'm not on my phone. Like, I interact with them, I ask, and if they maybe don't want to interact, which honestly I've found few and far between. Most of the time people want to talk or have a conversation. I put my phone away and I'm just having a conversation, asking them what they're excited about or what's new or what they have coming up, any of those things. And it's just really nice to be able to connect to other humans. And I think in general, like as teachers, we might not have the opportunity to connect one-on-one with our students if you're teaching a class or you're leading a retreat or doing something, because you're holding space, right? So for me, I always find it really important to be able to do that one-on-one connection. I'm introverted, which is, some people are like, they find it hard to believe, but I'm definitely an introvert. And so I find that I get that cuppeth runneth over feeling when I am with one-on-one, just with one person, and I'm having a deep conversation. It's me and my Uber or Lyft driver. It's like me and one of my students, so.
But, you asked me what I see as the future of the yoga community.
Yeah.
And I hope that, and I do think that the two can coexist. It's not wrong to put up images and have things be visual. But my hope is that we keep coming back to the impact of one-on-one. There are many teachers in our lineages that believed it should be one-on-one. And if it isn't one-on-one, that it is at least in real life.
Yes.
And again, there's nothing wrong with digital. I have people who practice with me on the Udaya and Gaia platforms that I'm on that I then get to meet out in the world. And it's extraordinary. I mean, that's mind-boggling. Yeah. And it's like we know each other already because we've had this experience together. So those things are terrific, but I think that this richness of really truly connecting in person needs to not get lost, and that we can be instrumental and need to be instrumental in that, connecting within ourselves, connecting to each other, connecting to, our planet needs us to not preach about connecting, but to actually be leaders by example of connecting to what's important worldwide, and what brings us together, celebrating our differences, but also finding that commonality. Because I think it's important that we celebrate what's different about us too, not homogenize that.
Yeah.
But really explore and applaud that. You lead a lot of retreats, I do too. That's something that I really bring into the retreat is we're here to see this culture and to learn about this culture. And to see the ways in which we're the same, but also to really get excited about what's different.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. What is your favorite piece of yogic philosophy to teach?
I think,
And
gosh,
then
it's such a big one.
I know, and then I'll tell you my favorite that you wrote about that I really liked.
Okay. Well, I think it's probably, I mean, it's many things, but Santosha kind of encompasses it, is this idea of a deep-seated sense of contentment, which really addresses the nothing's ever enough, or I'm not enough, or really making peace on a profound level. But peace that doesn't limit also knowing that there's room for growth and expansion. So the curiosity remaining in that equation, and curiosity doesn't mean that you're finding fault. So Santosha is really this sort of, maybe the existence of the heavy lifting of gratitude, but also like taking on the challenges and staying in the laboratory. I think maybe that aspect of it.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, obviously it's like we can love all of the yogic philosophy out there, but I was just curious as to which one.
Yeah.
Because I feel like all the teachers that I know or the friends of mine, like we always have that one thing that we revert back to, that it's just the underlying tone of what we like to speak to.
It's like our mission. It
Yeah,
represents our mission.
and my favorite was Pratipakshabhavana. You know, you talk about this. Yeah. And so tell the listeners what Pratipakshabhavana means and how you utilized it in the book.
Yeah, that's what I call what's in the way is the way. And it's really finding the obstacle as the opportunity. It's turning a seeming negative into a positive, into an opportunity. It is the work of the laboratory. It's the work of getting your book published. It's the work of so, yeah, right. So many things. Yeah. Because there are going to be challenges, but those challenges are opportunities to become better at what we are and who we are, as individuals, as communities, as a planet. You know, I think it's a really important one. You know. And that we all need to be in it together. So the warts and all thing, you know, like the not just the beautiful glossy filtered, the, you know, like, me too, you know.
The gnarly things.
The gnarly things.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of questions that I like to ask all of my guests, and so I'm going to go into the array of them.
Okay.
The first one is, if you can go back in time and give advice to your 15-year-old self, what would you say to her?
Oof, gosh, she was so many things. You're still going to be headstrong, but you're going to be a little bit easier to be around pretty soon.
Well,
and yoga's going to have a lot to do with that.
That's great. What will your 95-year-old self tell you now?
It's okay to miss a day on your mat sometimes, you know? and the mat can be a literal mat or not, but you know, it's actually okay if you skip a day sometimes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I like that. That's good. What does freedom mean?
Freedom means unabashed curiosity. It means the ability to just not really care so much about what other people think and follow something that's a little bit more genuine to yourself. So, you know.
Yeah, I love that.
Not living in the confines of appearance or what other people think.
Yeah, I like that. I always love to hear people's responses, and I say this all the time, but it's a nice perspective. You know, I like to just hear, because I feel like there's always that undertone that it's the tapestry that we're all weaving together. There's always that commonality, that feeling of, expansion, or living beyond limitation, or expanding beyond the confines type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So I created this podcast as a way for me to talk to really awesome people.
Well done. I've loved all the people you talked to.
Good.
Yeah, I'm sort of obsessed with listening to your podcast.
Yay, that's exciting. Well, now you're going to be on there, so you get to listen to yourself. So the idea was to create a space where people could come to get inspired, or to feel community, or to not feel like they're alone. And it's the idea that we're all radically loved and we're all radically supported, right? So the universe works for us and not against us. Mm-hmm. And so coming up to the final two questions for you is, the first one is, how do you feel radically loved, and what do you radically love?
I feel radically loved because I get to do this thing and call it my living. I mean, it's absurd, really. I pinch myself on a daily basis. And yes, I teach asana, but that's not really what I mean. I do, but to create community on a regular basis in various situations, and be amidst these extraordinary people who want to come together and do this with each other is, that's radical love. That's radical love. Every time I walk into that situation and feel that love, it's mind-boggling, and this is 20 years later. It never gets old, never. And I radically love that. I mean, it's a reciprocal thing. It's learning from our students. I mean, my goodness, they're such amazing teachers. Learning from other teachers is extraordinary. Learning from life, learning from travels, and having the opportunity to do all those things. That is what I radically love. I really, really genuinely do.
I love that. I'm just like in awe right now. Again, that to me is so inspiring and humbling, and thank you. And I'm deeply, deeply humbled and grateful to be in a community with amazing teachers like yourself.
Oh, well,
so
back at you.
I'm really happy about that. Okay, so for the people listening, Andrea and I will continue to have our love fest once we conclude this. But for the people listening, where can they go to get more information about you and retreats or trainings or anything that you're doing?
You can go to andreamarcum.com, MARCUM, and you'll find out about retreats there. I'm involved in the YogaWorks teacher training program, both at the 200 and 300 hour, starting in January of 2019. There's a 200 hour that I'm a part of, and then there's a 300 hour mentoring. You can get my book on Amazon. You can listen to the audiobook. I actually read the audiobook. That was quite an experience. 7.5 hours of reading was the longest meditation I've ever done. It was really kind of great. Yeah, so if you're an audiobook person, I got you covered.
Cool.
Audible.com. In fact, you can get the book for free if you join Audible, and download it and listen to it as you're driving or running or whatever you do.
Oh, awesome.
And retreats are also on my website. I do something called Company. The Om and Company is pronounced, and it's an integration of my book stuff for offsites for businesses and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's all there.
Wow. Okay, so for those of you listening, if you're on your device, if you hit the info button, or if you go to the details and check out the show notes, the links to all of those things that Andrea just mentioned will be on there. We'll also add a link to Audible, so if you want to listen to the audiobook, you sign up for Audible, you get it for free. And that is going to do it. I want to take a moment to just say thank you again for coming over to my house and spending some time with me, and for sharing your wisdom and your gifts, and for being such a heart-centered, loving yogini in the world. Thank you for being awesome. No.
We'll continue our love fest.
Yeah,
now.
We're going to continue our love fest, guys. Thank you for listening so much. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am so excited to continue to do this. Please share this with your friends. Email us, message us on Instagram at Rosie Acosta or on Twitter at Rosie Acosta. Subscribe on iTunes, write a review. We love doing this, so please help us continue to keep this podcast going. Thanks for listening. Is there something missing in your life? Is there something that you want to do in the world to create an impact but feel that it's overwhelming? So many of us walk through life feeling unsatisfied, overwhelmed, tired, and desperate for a deeper connection, but don't quite know how to achieve the things that we want in life. Join us this spring at the Dunsky Castle in Scotland for 7 days of yoga, meditation, and yoga nidra, all focusing on finding your life's purpose. During our time together, we will learn how and when to take action, how to lead from our heart and not our head, how to break up with our inner critic for good, and dive deep into learning about desire and discipline and how this creates a purposeful life. For more information, go to radicallyloved.com, or you can message us at info@radicallyloved.com, subject Scotland. We'll see you soon.